Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and I hope all of you can hear me clearly. In case if you have any difficulty hearing, please send me a message and I'll look into it. And thank you for joining us during a Friday afternoon. I understand you know, it must be a busy afternoon. So let's get started real quick. The very purpose of why we conduct these information sessions is because we currently going through our recruitment period, something usual we do during this time of the year to recruit new applicants for the autumn 2026 intake, that is August next year. So what I'm going to do is I'll deliver the session first, and then if you have any questions, feel free to ask them verbally, or you can even send them through the chat box. So I'll quickly get started. Um, I know most of you have arrived here from our social media channels, but in case if you do not know about us, we are among one of the first couple of firms in Sri Lanka to promote education in Sweden for Sri Lankan students. When we started, we had, I think, one other competitor parallelly to us. And then we're certainly the first in Sri Lanka to promote higher education in Finland. We have been processing applicants for Finland from a time where when the number of applicants from Sri Lanka were around below 10 uh, from 2010. And then we do have 1 billion rupees worth of scholarships under our belt. And over the years, last 15 years, we have processed over 2,000 Sri Lankan nationals for these countries such as Sweden, Finland, and some of them for even Norway and Estonia. So here's a quick recap about ourselves. So we've been running continuously for the last 15 years from 2010, one of the first couple of firms to promote higher education in Sweden, certainly the first in Sri Lanka to promote higher education in Finland. And we have handled a considerable number of applicants over the years. And what's more important to us is the last part. The very reason why we are conducting these sessions in advance is because we have a practical situation where we're able to process about 50 to 60 applications every year. Obviously, we're more than happy to handle thousands of applications, but in reality, both of these countries, Sweden and Finland, they have very short application periods, especially Finland. Some of their universities actually open up for about 2 weeks time to apply. So it's very important for us to ensure we have our maximum handling capacity reached before the actual application time period. And that's the very reason why we are conducting these sessions. And we have already, I think, completed about 65, 70% of the numbers this year. And if you are to apply through us, we highly recommend you to, go through the process, do a bit of a research on your own as well. And then if you feel confident about your ability to apply, go ahead and initiate the process with us. And I think this session will also help those who are planning on applying on their own to a certain extent, because I can share all the information that I know about the process. So let's quickly get into the requirements. So here I would like to talk about a couple of different programs. Firstly, I'll cover the bachelor's part because I understand some of you are here who want to apply for your bachelor's. So if that is the requirement, the general criteria to apply for a bachelor's is to have at least four simple passes for your GCE levels, including general English. If you have it, you can apply. But then again, if you want to add Finland into the process, there's also an English proficiency requirement. You have to have at least six for each component if it is IELTS, or if you are taking up PTE, the required score is about 59 for each component, one of the two. And you can have some time to submit your IELTS for PTE score for bachelor's applicants. But then again, you have to at least, initiate the process as early as possible and then submit the IELTS requirement by the second or third week of December to make it on time, if you go through what that is. And then on top of your IELTS, especially if you are planning on applying for Finland, I recommend you to take up the test SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test. And the advantage of taking up SAT is that will increase your chances to be able to receive an admission. I'll put it this way. If there are, let's assume if there are 2,000 applications from Sri Lanka for Finland for bachelor's level programs with A levels and IELTS or PTE, the number of those who have IELTS, A levels, and SAT will be definitely less than 100. So that's the kind of ratio you're looking at. And the more time you spend on SAT and get the score completed, the higher chances you'll have to receive an admission. That's about bachelor's. So we practice a policy of applying for bachelor's, and if you are to go through us, we practice a policy of applying for both Swedish and Finnish universities at the same time for the same cost. And then we can look into the admission options and decide what's good for you later on. So that's our usual policy. We always apply for Sweden and Finland simultaneously and then look into the best possible option during the admission round. That's about bachelor's. So now I'll start discussing about masters, which is our primary market actually. So to apply for a master's, you need to have a bachelor's degree with a class. If you have a class, much better. But there's a difference there. If you have a higher GPA, or at least it's kind of a GPA closer to a second lower, let's say 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, you can still apply for Sweden and Finland simultaneously through us. But in case if your GPA is low, I think probably the only option we can apply with confidence is Sweden. But then you also have to think about the length of the bachelor's, because in the year of 2022, Sweden imposed this new rule where it says if you have completed a 3-year bachelor's degree from a Sri Lankan university, you cannot apply for an admission from Sweden. The requirement is if it is a 3-year degree, you have to have at least 1 year of master's level studies completed in order to apply. But if your degree length is 4 years, you don't have any other issue. You can simply start the process and apply with confidence. And there's an exemption to that. In case if you have completed a British offshore degree in Sri Lanka, you can still apply even if it's a 3-year degree. Or even if you have completed any other foreign qualification, which is from any other country than Sri Lanka or India, you can still apply without any issue. So the general requirement to apply is to have a bachelor's degree. If it's a Sri Lankan degree, better if it is 4 years in length. But then again, if you have a 3-year degree still with a class, we can try to apply for Finland alone and see how it works for you. And the second requirement is IELTS, or I would call it English Proficiency Test Score. So it can be IELTS or PTE. These are the two major tests most our Sri Lankans prefer to take up. So if it is IELTS for master's level education, this is only for Finland anyway. If you are to add Finland as an option, you need to have a score of 6.5 with 6 for each component. And in case if you want to apply, take up the test PTE, the required score is 62 overall with no component less than 59. There can be other universities like Universities of Applied Sciences where the IELTS requirement is lower, but our services are limited to public research universities in Finland at the master's level. So there's 9 research universities and all 9 universities require you to have this score. 6.5 is 6. And if you want to apply for Sweden, for an example, there's no IELTS requirement provided you have at least a simple pass for the subject general English at A levels. So if you have completed your A levels, you have a simple pass for your general English. If you feel like you don't want to take up IELTS or you don't have time to take up IELTS or a similar test, you can still apply for Sweden alone through us. And most of the times get admitted without any English proficiency test score. But especially if you have a class, I highly recommend you to take up some sort of an English proficiency test score, because that'll increase your chances of being able to secure an admission from a country like Finland, where there's always a higher probability for you to be able to secure a scholarship of some kind. And there's a reason behind that. Finland used to offer an absolute free education system to international students until the year 2019. Anyone who had gone to Finland through us from 2010 to 2019, they paid zero euros as their tuition fees. And interestingly, the numbers of those who are going to Finland increase after they introduced the tuition fees for some reason. And then the third point is about the fact that applicants are also able to pay a fee and study in case if they're admitted without a scholarship, which is perfectly possible in these countries. But then again, the average tuition fee range nowadays, it depends from one option to another, but the average range is anywhere between 10,000 euros to 15,000 euros, about 3.3 million rupees to about 5 million rupees on average per year. And then the important thing is, if you think about a country like Sweden, they only charge you by the semester. So you can pay half of that figure and move to the country and then start paying every semester. But I highly recommend, if that is the case, if you are picking on Sweden, I highly recommend you to have sufficient funds at least to cover the second semester on the minimum, because it takes some time to adapt into these countries. It takes some time to find your first job, and if you are under the hope of recouping all these tuition fees right from the second semester, I don't think it'll be possible nowadays in any of these countries. So if you are to make a decision to get into these countries, it's better to have sufficient funds, at least first year worth of tuition fees. And in case if you have no scholarship whatsoever, you have to have the full tuition fee in hand, at least. And the tuition fee range is anywhere between 10,000 to 15,000 euros, over 3.3 million to 5 million rupees every year. And then the fourth point is applicable to those who are planning on completing anything related to business management. It's an optional requirement, but there are some programs. If you think about a program like business analytics, most of the Finnish universities, namely Aalto and University of Oulu, both of these units have business analytics, and both of these units want you to have some sort of a GMAT score, which is kind of a tougher test as far as I know about it. But then again, if you have good grades, if you have the right IELTS score, GMAT will be, a kind of an investment for you to have increased chances to secure a scholarship. Again, it's about the numbers. Let's assume there are, let's say, 1,000 Sri Lankans applying for management-related programs in these countries with a bachelor's degree and an IELTS score. The number of those who have a bachelor's, IELTS, and GMAT will be definitely lesser than 50 or so. So that will increase your chances again to be able to be considered for a scholarship of some kind. And there are some universities, as I mentioned before, in both Sweden and Finland, where they give first priority to students with GMAT. So if you have good grades, if you have completed IELTS, and if you're applying for anything related to business, GMAT can be a good investment. But then again, this is only applicable to those who want to apply for management related programs like finance, mostly like finance and business analytics. If you come from any other background, let's say computer science, engineering, bioscience, any of these other subject areas, you don't have to worry about it. And even if you want to apply for business related ones, GMAT is still an optional requirement because there are plenty of other universities where it's not a compulsory requirement. And the last part I already covered. If you are to go there, you should have the ability to pay your tuition fees, especially if you do not have any kind of a scholarship. Please ensure you have at least 1 year worth of tuition fees on the minimum, and also 6 months worth of living expenses again on the minimum. So this living expenses kind of, it depends from one person to another. It depends on various factors like the number of family members you have, your lifestyle and all that. But as an average, I recommend you to have at least 1,000 euros if you are a family of two or three on the minimum, about 330,000 or so. And in case if you're an individual applicant, I think you still need to have about 650, 700 euros nowadays. On average, about 220,000 to 250,000 or so. That's something you have to keep in mind to ensure these countries are safe options. I had a chat with someone this morning, and I told pretty much the same thing. I've been hearing these stories about, it's difficult to find jobs in these countries and all that. And my understanding of that, it has been that way as far as I can remember. You just have to financially prepare to embrace this. There's no other option. If you are to get into these European countries where English is not spoken as the main language, you have to have the ability to pay at least a fraction of your tuition fees, in this case, at least for the first year, and also cover up your living expenses at least for the first 6 months on the minimum. That will give you some room to go out and find a job offer, which will help you cover the remaining part of the tuition fees. So compared to an English speaking country, this is one serious issue you have to look into and be prepared for. So let's keep moving forward. I'd like to talk about the disadvantages of these countries first. The first one, obviously, is the fact that you have to learn some sort of a foreign language. If you are to go into Sweden, you have to learn Swedish. In Finland, you have to learn Finnish. There's no other option, especially if you're planning on staying in these countries in the long term. Language is an absolute must. There's no other way around it. But the interesting thing is, if you come from an engineering or computer science or software related backgrounds, there's a very high probability for you to be able to find a job offer without being able to speak the local language. I've had hundreds of clients, especially the ones who come from engineering and software backgrounds. They have been able to find job offers, like professional job offers, without being able to speak a word of local language. But for every other sector, I personally believe it'll be very important for you to spend some time working on the language, because otherwise it can become difficult to find a job offer related to your studies after completion of your master's or even bachelor's for that matter. The second one, again, that's something we cannot change. You have to be able to prepare, to, live in hard, the climate is totally different. So you have to be able to, live in such an environment. There's no other option. And also the third one, it's about it's again no longer applicable much, but in the past I have received complaints from my clients who go like, Chamak, I'm the only person of color in my area. But I don't think this is no longer this is applicable any longer, because give or take, any Swedish or Finnish university nowadays have at least like 10, 15 active Sri Lankan students, regardless of the location. And they also have plenty of other South Asian students. So I don't think this matters much. But then again, you never know. You have to be able to, prepare for some sort of a cultural shock, especially if you're so attached to the home country. And the last one is probably the most important one out of all. You have to be able to prepare to go through difficulties of finding employment. Even to find one of these entry level, jobs, you have to struggle a bit, because most of these employers would expect you to speak their language, which is not something you can do right after arrival. So that has been a problem for as long as I can remember. So there's no other way around. You have to learn some local language, make some local contacts, speak to other international students, and keep trying your best to find that first job offer. I wanted to talk about something about claiming social benefits, unemployment benefits in countries like Finland. Someone recently popped the question, and my opinion about that is, anyway, it can be a bit controversial, but my opinion about that is, back in old days, I processed at least 1,000 plus students, close to 1,000, I would say, applicants prior to 2019. And at that time in Sri Lanka, the number of those who are choosing Finland were around 50, very limited numbers. And I have not heard of anyone claiming social benefits, because they had the right budget. Most of them actually had the right budget. They put in their best efforts to find a job offer. And as far as I know about it, pretty much every single one of them who wanted to stay back and apply for some sort of loan stay visas managed to do that. But unfortunately, today the landscape have changed, and I've seen Finland being advertised as a destination to claim unemployment benefits, which I think will not sustain for a longer time period. I know for a fact that they have reduced the amount of money they pay over the years, and I highly recommend you to be prepared to work, or at least be prepared to find work from the day one, rather than relying on welfare benefits, because I don't think it creates some other issues. For an example, Finland used to have a very smooth visa process. We never ever had a refusal. We still have that record. Anyways, we have had one refusal in the year of 2017. That's 7 years after processing applicants, and never had a refusal thereafter as well for Finland. For Sweden, yes, we have had some number of refusals every year, especially after the year 2016 or so. But the surprising factor is Finland used to have a very smooth visa process, very limited documents. You pay it, you get your appointment through the Finnish embassy back then. They didn't even have VFS on board back then. And every single visa was granted within a very short time period. But unfortunately, over the last couple of years, they have been requesting more information about finances, sources of finances, and additional information related to finances. All that is happening because of, I believe, one major reason is because of the actions of some who actually, you know, they claim they have right amount of money in hand, but once they go there, they apply for unemployment benefits, which is actually unfair for those students who work very hard, academically and professionally, establish themselves to be able to afford a journey of this nature. That's just my opinion anyway. And now I'd like to talk about the advantages of studying in these countries. And the very first one I believe is the fact that they have plenty of scholarship options. And in fact, all these countries at some point of time had a free education system open to international students. Sweden introduced their tuition fees back in 2011. Finland introduced their fees in 2019. Even countries like Norway, they were the last remaining country to offer free education, but they introduced their fee in the year of 2023. And even Estonia, which is also a country we had for individual applicants, they used to have a free system until 2020 or so as well. So that's one primary reason why they still offer scholarships in large numbers. If you think about this year, almost like over 65% of all applicants had scholarships for Finland. So that's the kind of numbers we can reveal, because actually it's more than two-thirds of them, they had some sort of a scholarship. The reason is it's been only about 6 years after they introduced their fees, so they're still trying their best to offer some sort of scholarships. But anyway, we cannot take these things for granted. So if you go through us, I highly recommend you to be prepared to go in as a fee-paying applicant in case if you do not land any kind of a scholarship. The second one is the fact that they allow you to access certain social security benefits regardless of your visa. And this is actually proven by the fact that you can apply for unemployment benefits even when you're on a student visa also. So I don't really recommend you to do that at all, but then it's possible. And also you have the right to apply for a work permit even with an entry level kind of a job offer. But then again, this is more like a theoretical explanation. The idea is if you think about Sweden, they have specified a salary requirement, 28,500 Swedish kronor, as far as I know about it. And back then, before about 4 years back, the requirement was 13,250 Swedish kronor, which was the minimum kind of a wage at that time. Anyone who find a full-time job offer, even as a cleaner, they were paid more than that. But now the situation has changed over the years. Now they want you to have about 28,500. So I don't think any cleaning job will pay you that much. So in theory, you can apply for a work permit if you have that kind of a salary, monthly salary. But in reality, to be able to receive that kind of a salary, you at least have to be a cleaning supervisor. So, it's above the entry level kind of a position. In Finland, the requirement is currently at 14,000 euros annual. And it is very realistic because the minimum wage, the kind of minimum wage is like around 10,000, 11,000 euro range. So finding a job that pays you about 14,000 compared to Sweden sometimes can be easy. But then you have to think about the type of opportunities you have, especially if you do not have a scholarship, but you come from a background like engineering or technology or science. I think Sweden actually have better opportunities compared to Finland when it comes to employment. But if you have a scholarship for a considerable amount of money, I think Finland becomes the better option. That's just my opinion anyway. So the fourth factor is about healthcare facilities. Again, regardless of the visa, in the event of hospitalizations, you do have right to access the public funded hospitals, and very little amount of money needs to be paid. And but still, I recommend you to purchase a private insurance because, especially if you are moving with kids, it'll create a more safer environment for you. And the fifth one is about free education for your children, including state-funded daycare facilities. I recently heard that there's a bit of a waiting time nowadays with the increased number of immigrants, but then again, it is free in the sense like if you place them at state-funded places, there won't be any cost to pay. And also, the other factor is something I learned from one of my former clients. He's very clever with finding options and keeping backup options, just to be prepared to stay there permanently. In a country like Sweden, let's assume if the main applicant is studying some kind of a master's qualification, second, the applicant could learn the Swedish language free of charge. They have these Swedish for immigrant centers scattered throughout the country where the language is being taught free of charge. But you obviously have to put in some efforts to learn the language. If you can acquire a certain level of fluency in the Swedish language, you have access to all the vocational education sector, again, free of charge. You don't have to pay for that as long as you learn in Swedish language, uh, which can be very helpful because end of the day the requirement is to find a job offer. That means the country's fairly threshold requirement for a work permit. So if the two of you prepare for this in advance, if one of you able to find a job offer after a completion of your master's or even bachelor's for that matter, one of you can apply for a work permit so the other person can naturally stay and work full time. And the last fact is that you can visibly see, they do have some sort of inclusive systems in place to absorb immigrants. Even if you think about a country like Sweden, they do teach their language free of charge. Even in Finland, it's less or more the same. They offer you these social benefits, which sometimes people abuse. So, but still, I believe you can make it and become a lone stay resident if you plan the process in advance rather than waiting till the last minute to find what you can do next. So I would like to give a summary of things to be concerned of. The first one is you must either be on a scholarship of some kind because it'll increase your financial security when you're there, or else you have to have sufficient capital to be able to cover up your tuition fees at least for the first year, and cover up your living expenses at least for the first 6 months. The third one is you have to be able to learn the local language. There's no other way around it. You have to be prepared for that. You have to put in some efforts, and it's always better by the time of completion of your studies if you can speak some local language because it will help you with finding employment. I can give you one example. I had this former client of mine. She was working at Union Bank. In fact, from a sample of about 150, 200 bankers. I don't know how that link happened, but we have processed applicants from pretty much all major banks in Sri Lanka. But this lady is the only person I know who ended up working in Sweden as a banker. I believe she's a senior banker now. She's a Swedish citizen. And the difference I noticed is she kind of learned the Swedish language. I think she's a fast learner. And she managed to join a bank during her time as a student. And she ended up becoming a professional banker. And out of a sample of about 150 or more, she's the only person I know who's performing the same job that she was engaged back in Sri Lanka. But it's different for most of the engineering graduates, especially computer science and software engineering professionals, because pretty much everyone I know actually managed to find employment after going into these countries. But I cannot say the same for management grads or anyone who completed humanities related or social sciences related bachelors. It can sometimes become difficult to find a job offer if you do not work on the language. So that's the honest situation. You have to be able to work on the language or gain some sort of a skill that'll help you find employment in the long term. And the other thing is about the ability to try securing a full-time job offer for the spouse is also interesting because your spouse, when you go there, they do have full work rights in both countries, Sweden and Finland. By the way, I don't know if everyone is aware of the fact that Sweden offer full work rights for both the students and spouse. There are only two countries I have noticed in the whole of the European Union where it's possible, Sweden and Estonia. They allow the international student to work full time in the country without any restrictions, as long as your roster does not clash with the study schedule. So you do have the ability to try securing a full time job offer for the spouse, which means like your spouse does not have to wait until you complete your studies. If your spouse finds a job that pays the threshold requirement for a work permit, he or she can apply for a work permit. The only difference is some of the time, especially in a country like Sweden, they can request the spouse to leave the European Union during the processing time, which is again not that much of a problem, but then it is still possible for them to switch their visa in between before you complete your studies if they find a job offer. And the last one is just a request. I highly recommend you to find a legal pathway before discontinuing your studies. And nowadays, my advice is always to complete the studies you're there for before thinking about switching your visas to something else. Because in the past, they were very flexible because the numbers were on the lower side. I have seen plenty of applicants. Even the bank lady I told you, she went there for a bachelor's and then she switched to a work permit after receiving an offer, and then she continued to pursue her bachelor's while while she was in a work permit. It was possible back then, but with the change immigration regulations, sometimes it can be tougher nowadays. For an example, I recently had a client of mine. She was living in Sweden for about 3, 4 years. What she has done is she has switched to a work permit without completing her studies, and the employer ended up, with some kind of a layoff, and she lost her job. So she was given 3 months to find a new job offer that pays her 28,500, and she was unable to find it. So when she wanted to apply for a student visa again, she was requested to leave Sweden and wait outside the European Union for processing. Luckily, she got her visa granted, but then again, her whole family had to move out of Sweden, and in case if they refuse her visa, there was no way for her to go back. It's always better, especially nowadays with these, tightened immigration regulations, to complete your academic qualification first and make use of your post-study time to apply for a work permit. The idea is in Sweden, you are given 1 year of post-study time after completion of your studies to find a job offer. And in Finland, you are given 2 years of post-study time. But theoretically, you do have about 3 years time in Sweden to find a full-time job offer, especially for the spouse. And in Finland, you have 4 years of time. So if one of you can find a job offer that pays the threshold requirement, you can apply for a work permit. And my advice is, if you are to switch into a work permit, try to do that from your spouse's side. You can continue to be on a student visa and complete your qualification before applying for that post-study time period. So I'd like to talk about how the process looks like if you apply through us. First and foremost, if you are married and both of you are equally qualified, if both of you have bachelors, we only charge from one person, but we're still happy to apply for the two of you for the same cost just to see how it works. Because our primary focus is to be, try our best to secure some sort of a scholarship. So it's good for our portfolio as well if the two of you apply together. But we need your help with IS, obviously. But let's say if the two of you have second upper classes, so second lower classes for your bachelors, if you work on IS, you can initiate the process. Both can work on IS better. At least if one of you can work on IS, we can at least at Finland for one person and apply for Sweden for the two of you. So the whole idea is that's something we do intentionally because normally we apply for about four different masters from Sweden and four masters from Finland, like 8 different masters together. And the two of you are applying, we'll have 16 masters. 1 out of 16 kind of a probability to be able to secure a scholarship of some sort. And whenever we did that, we never ever failed. Always, at least one of the applicants had some sort of a scholarship. Having said that, in case if you happen to be an individual applicant, we very rarely process individual applicants anyway. I think only about 5 to 10% of our applicants are single applicants for some reason. But then again, if you happen to be single applicant, there are two other countries we can add at no extra cost, namely Norway and Estonia. Especially if you come from software engineering background, Estonia is a super cool option. Plenty of opportunities around, but I can say the same for other subject areas. The whole point is if you are a single unmarried applicant, instead of applying for Sweden and Finland alone, we can also add Norway and Estonia at no extra cost and apply for at least 12 different master's programs from these four countries. So it works in a way. There are steps to follow. The first one is we call it assessment process. What we do is if you are to go through us, we need some documents from your end, usually your degree cert, transcript, and passport copy, along with our assessment application and the assessment fee of 35,000 rupees. If you're a bachelor's applicant, we need you to submit your O levels, A levels, passport copy, assessment application, and the fee of 35,000. Once you hand over these documents, we can, within a couple of weeks' time, get back to you with a list of options available with all the course contents and all exact documents we need from you to process you further. So from the list we provide, you can pick your options. If you're an individual applicant, you can pick your options from Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Estonia, in case if you want to add them anyways. Or else you can pick your options from Sweden and Finland. And once you pick your options, you can submit the supporting documents along with our actual application fee, which is 185,000 rupees. I understand it's slightly expensive. Um, you know, but then again, we apply for multiple options for the same cost. Even if you decide to apply for Sweden alone, even if you decide to apply for all other countries, there's no change in the cost. And the third one is if we apply on time, between mid-March to mid-April, we can receive all these admission decisions, look at the best option available. Obviously, the best option is most of the times the least possible tuition fee amount you have to pay for the most. So we can pick the best option and initiate the visa process. When you want to apply for your visa, we charge a service charge of about 450,000 from the main applicant and extra 100,000 rupees from the spouse in case if you have received a scholarship for at least 50% of the tuition fee value. And in case if your tuition fee value or the scholarship value is less than 49%, or if you decide to go in as a fee paying applicant, then these service charges will come down to about 350,000 for the main applicant and extra 100,000 for the co-applicant. And to align the policies of these Scandinavian countries with ours, we don't charge anything from children. And in fact, we once had a five kids kind of a family. So that in total, there were like 7 different visa applications to process, and we didn't charge them. So as I mentioned before, the assessment process works in a way. If you are to initiate the process through us, we need you to submit your degree cert transcript and passport copy, along with our assessment application, which is something I'm going to send to you tomorrow. And then the assessment fee, which is 35,000 rupees. Once you hand over the documents, we can come back and confirm the list of options you can apply with an increased probability to be able to receive an offer. We can also mention all the course contents and all the documents we need from you and to process you further, and then move to the second step. Once you identify what options to apply, you can freely pick your options and submit all supporting documents along with our application fee, which is 185,000 rupees amount. And then we can initiate the actual application process. If you are a couple who are equally qualified, who both have bachelors, if you want to, try your luck of securing a scholarship, what you can do is you can send us 2 separate assessment applications along with 2 separate mails containing your documents with a single payment slip. So we can still process you with a single payment, even if the 2 of you are applying. And the third step is once we place your applications between mid-March to mid-April next year, we can receive all the admission decisions. That's when the visa process will start. Usually, I'll quickly cover Norway and Estonia first because those options are only applicable to individual applicants. So if you want to apply for a Norwegian visa, they have set a specific amount of money that you have to transfer into the university's bank account. Usually, this amount is around 4 million, slightly more than 4 million rupees. There's no other requirements, no bank statements, no source of funds, no whatsoever. They will send you an invoice for the living expenses estimated by the UDI or Norwegian Directorate of Immigration. You transfer this money to the university's account and they will issue a deposit certificate which you can use for a visa. You don't have to go anywhere. You can apply through VFS. You submit the documents, receive the decision. Once it's ready, you can arrive in the country. So that's probably the only option out of all 4 options where you can get the process completed within Sri Lanka itself. And then Estonia. They have the amount of funds they estimate you to have. If I add a buffer from my end, it'll be around 4 to 5 million rupee figure. So you have to have that money in a bank account in your own name. They don't care much about source of funds and all, but you still need to have about 4 to 5 million rupees. If you have it, you can book an appointment with the Estonian embassy, visit the embassy on time. You have to face one-on-one interview with the case officer there, visa officer. And then you have to wait in New Delhi for about 10 working days. That's the average processing time. And get your visa granted or get the decision made. You can come back to Sri Lanka and fly to Tallinn. So that's about Estonian process. Sweden and Finland is different. If I cover Sweden first, the process works in a way you have to have sufficient amount of funds because most of the applicants, as I said before, who apply for Sweden and Finland, they're family applicants. So you're looking at some sort of money. From the last year onwards, they allowed all international students to apply for full-length visas. So now you can, if your master's program is 2 years, you can apply for a visa for entire 2 years. But then again, you have to have sufficient funds for the entire length of the visa. So the idea is If you are an individual applicant and if you want to apply for a Swedish visa for the entire length, I recommend you to have at least 9 million rupees in hand or more. If you are a married applicant and if the two of you want to apply, you need to have at least like good 12 million, close to 12 million, or sometimes more amount of money to apply for a 2 year visa. And if you have any kid, then I recommend you have at least two more million rupees. So that gives you a total of about 14 million for a family of three if you are to apply for a 2 year visa. Having said that, the amounts I'm quoting is actually is our own estimates. If you visit the migration agency's website, the amounts they have quoted is far lower than this. But then again, our advice is always have a unique amount of sum involved when it comes to bank statements, because the last thing I want you to do is to have the exact same amount the migration authority estimates, because if you do that, every single Sri Lankans, at least most of the Sri Lankans who apply for Swedish visas will have the same amount of money in their accounts, which can be a horrible thing to do in the long term. So the general idea is if you want to apply for a full length visa, about 9 million for an individual, about 12 million for a family of two, or about 14 million for a family of three, and at least 2 million additional for each additional child in case if you have more. That's the kind of sum you're looking at. They don't care much about source of funds again, but then these it's better if you can keep these funds in your bank account for a considerable amount of time if you have your own money. But if you are organizing your finances at the last minute, if you have valid explanations, you can show in case if they ask, they don't always ask that, you can still be good to go. But this is probably one of the reasons why most of our Swedish applicants they apply only for 1 year visas. Because if you want to apply for a 1 year visa, the amount of money you need to show for an individual applicant will be around 6 million rupees. For a family of two, about 9 million. For a family of three, about 10.5 to 11 million. For a family of four, you can have about 12 million. The advantage of doing that is you only require a reduced amount of funds to apply for your visa. And as long as you complete your master's or bachelor's, properly and maintain the minimum credit requirements, you can apply for a visa extension without any trouble. And anyway, this is what people have been doing for the last 15 plus years we've been operating. It's just last year only they introduced the ability to apply for a full length visa in Sweden for the entire family. They were running some kind of a pilot project for a few years, but then it was last year when they introduced the ability for the entire family to apply for full length visa pretty much for all universities. And then we come to Finland, where the process is getting more complicated nowadays, maybe due to increase number of arrivals. So for Finland, the requirement is um, funds wise, it's almost like similar to Sweden. The only difference is even if you maintain your funds good enough for 1 year time period, you can still be granted the visa. It's only applicable to student anyway. The student can be granted a full length visa. So in Finland, our estimate is always contain a buffer. It's not the minimum amount quoted by the migration service. We have added about 20-30% buffer just to be safe. So if you're an individual applicant, we recommend you to have at least 6 million rupees. If you're a family of two, at least 9 million. If you're a family of three, at least 10 to 10.5 million. Or if you're a family of four, at least 12 million. The exact same amount of money you require to have for a Swedish visa for 1 year. But the difference is in Finland, if you show these amounts, the main applicant can be granted a full-length visa. And again, all co-applicants, regardless of the money you have, their visas will be granted yearly basis. So you have to renew your um, dependent visa of your dependents once you move into Finland. But as mentioned before, if you complete your studies, maintain the minimum credit requirements, you can apply for an extension without any trouble. So the difference between Sweden and Finland is in Sweden, very rarely they question about source of funds and all this additional information related to funds. But in Finland nowadays, they're very strict about how you organize these funds and all. So I recommend you to have some kind of evidence in hand, especially if you organize these funds at the last minute. You have to be able to explain how these funds ever arrived in your account. But then again, if you are professionally engaged, if you have a reasonable salary, because I come across some inquiries where they mean, especially people who come from software industry and all that, they make about 1,500, 2,000 euros combined family income in Sri Lanka nowadays. So for those who have that kind of salary range, you don't have much to worry because it's understandable. The moment they look at the statements, even if you go and kind of illegally stay in Finland, the amount of money you can make is more sometimes lesser than what you make in Sri Lanka. But for the vast majority who do not make that kind of money, it's better to have evidence of funds, how you have organized these funds. So it can come in form of a land sale if you have done one, or it can come from in form of gifts or financial donations given to you by a third party. So it depends from one individual to another, and it's always better if you can have a discussion with us about what is the safest option to you. So it's not like one size fits all kind of a requirement. It's better if we can have a discussion and finalize how we are going to organize these funds and how much we're going to show and what kind of sources we are going to produce as evidence. So the visa process works in a way for both of these countries, completely electronic. You don't have to visit any embassy to apply for a visa initially. What happens is we place the application online, we pay our visa fees online, and then for Sweden, very rarely again we have interviews for our applicants. This year, in fact, we only had one interview, one or two, maximum of two. So the idea is when we apply for a visa, two things could happen, two possible scenarios. They could call you up for a biometric visit, which is the healthiest sign of a direct grant. Back in old days, they had direct grants. They just grant the visa and ask you to come and produce your biometric details. But nowadays, the sign of getting a direct grant is to receive that biometric visit call. There is something like, in order to process your visa, we need you to provide your biometrics. So you have to visit the embassy or point of contact to provide your biometrics, which is the healthiest possible sign. If that happens, you don't need any appointments. You have to visit the Embassy of Sweden in New Delhi every morning and every weekday. Provide your thumbprints and photo. You have to pay them a courier fee of about 500, 600 INR. I cannot even recall the exact number. Let's say 1,000 INR max. You pay that, you come back, and then your visa will be granted most of the times. You don't have to go to New Delhi again. Once the visa is granted, they will courier these biometric resident permit cards to the honorary consul in Colombo, from where you can collect it and fly there. That's the best case scenario. And then there's a second scenario. They will say something like, look, we cannot process your visa based on the evidence you have provided. We need to have additional information. Therefore, you have to visit the Embassy of Sweden in New Delhi for an interview. It's a bit more complicated. So we have to provide whatever information they request us to provide. At the same time, we have to contact the embassy and request for an appointment to visit the embassy. And then on the given date and time, we can visit them, face the interview, and at the same time, we can provide our biometric data and come back. So regardless of the fact that whether you go there for biometrics or for an interview, there's no requirement for you to visit for a second time. Very rarely it happens, but it happened to us, I think, one time during the last 15 years. They had some issue with the computer systems. So the applicants were asked to come back again. But other than that, for Sweden, 99.99 times you only visit the embassy once. The only difference is they can sometimes call you up for an interview. If it happens, we have to request an interview date and time from the embassy. For biometric visits, there's no requirement for you to make any appointments. That's the only difference. And then we come to Finland, which is again the more complicated option. So for Finland, what will happen is nowadays you have to apply online. You have the option to pay online, and some of these Sri Lankans I know they kind of carry this money all the way to India and pay in cash or card. I don't recommend you to do that. There's a system for you to pay online. It's safer to pay online. So what you do is you apply online, pay your fees online, and then you can book an appointment through VFS, which can be very complex sometimes. But if we prepare in advance, we can get it done most of the times. And what will happen is we have to nowadays book separate interview appointments for the applicants from the same family. So there can be a possibility for the two of you or the three of you to go on two or three different dates. No other way around. You have to anyhow get used to it. As I said before, I recommend Finland if there's a considerable amount of a scholarship or if you come from non-technical or non-science related background. So the idea is once you secure the appointment from VFS, you can visit the visa application center on time. Um, there will be a very short interview. Again, for master's applicants who are going to research unis, very little interview questions as far as I've experienced it. They can have more questions for bachelor's applicants for some reason. But then they can be, there's a short interview. The length of the interview depends on the type of the program, the fact that you have a scholarship or not, how you have organized your funds, all that. So there's a physical interview, one-on-one. Once you complete the interview, they'll take your thumbprints and photograph, and then you can come back to Sri Lanka and wait. Once the decision is made again, they will send that plastic resident permit card to the VFS center in Colombo, from where you can collect it and fly there. So this year, I think we had about close to 27 applications for Finland. We had about, I think, 45 or 46 applications for Sweden. We had more applications for Sweden nowadays. So out of this sample, I think only 3 or 4 students had issues with their visas, because even most of them, they actually, except one obviously, most of them, they applied for their visa around the month of June. So my understanding of the process is the moment you receive an admission, you finalize it, you apply for your visa. If you do it as soon as possible, at least by the end of April or early May, there's a very high chance for the two of you or for the whole family to be able to go together. But then once you, let's say, in case if you delay your visa process and wait until like early June or mid June, then the amount of numbers or the number of applicants who apply around that time is a very big one. And that can be the reason why it becomes sometimes difficult to secure an early appointment if we apply around that time. So my advice is always prepare in advance, get your visa applied as soon as possible. And then if you do that, there's very high chance for us to be able to have your visa process on time for the program to start. But then again, most of the Finnish unis, not every single university, but most of the research unis, at least, they're flexible with allowing you to come a bit later. For an example, I have this applicant who applied for her visa in the month of June, I think towards the end of June, and her visa is already granted. She's now waiting to receive her biometric card, and her university has allowed her to arrive later. So, University of Eastern Finland. So perfectly okay with the late arrival, most of the units. So my understanding and my advice about the Finnish process is yes, it can have delays, but if we prepare in advance, if we do things right, most of the times we can make it without any problem. So I would also want to cover about visa fees. Norway, if I start with it, the average visa fee involved is about 111,657 something Norwegian kroners, as far as I can recall it. Can be a slight increase there because I didn't check the recent figure. But on average, it's about 150,000, a little bit less or more Sri Lankan rupees for your visa fees. In Sweden, the average visa fee for an adult applicant is about 1,500 Swedish kroners, which is about 45,000 to 50,000 rupees. And if you have a child, then the amount you pay us is actually half of that, about 22,500 or so. Finland has a bit of a weird kind of visa fee because I think that's probably the expensive most one I've seen over the years. They recently had an increase as well. Previously it was 350 euros, but I think now they charge about 400 um 50 or 4, I cannot even recall the exact amount. I think it's somewhere around 450 euro range from the main applicant. And then from the co-applicant, they charge 550. Previously, it was 470. And then if you have any child, then they're charging about 270 something from each child. So it's slightly expensive compared to most other countries, like especially Sweden. So on average, the Finnish visa application fee for an individual applicant will come close. It'll cost you more than 120,000 rupees. And for the co-applicant, 550 is equivalent to almost like close to 180,000, 190,000 rupees. And if you have a child, the amount you pay will be at least like close to 100,000 rupees. So it's expensive compared to some other options, you know, European options. I understand most of these English speaking countries charge much more. So on average, for a family of two, you are looking at a visa fee of at least good 300,000 rupees. And if you have a family of, one child, and if you have a family of three, I think you're looking at a visa fee of at least 370 to 380,000 rupees. Expensive compared to Sweden. And then Estonia, if you're an individual applicant and want to add Estonia, the amount of visa fee you pay is about 100 euros, comes to about 35,000, 33,000, 35,000 Sri Lankan rupees. That's probably the lowest possible visa fee you will pay in these countries. So that's about the visa fee. Anyways, I would like to have a recap of the actual costs involved in the process. The assessment fee you pay us if you go through us is 35,000 rupees. And then there's an actual application fee, which is 185,000 rupees. And then you have to pay the visa fee I quoted earlier. And for Norway, it's about 150,000 some rupees. For Sweden, it's about 45 to 50,000 from an adult applicant and half of that from a child. For Finland, it's about 150,000 or slightly more than that for an individual applicant. And then for a secondary applicant or from the spouse, they charge about 180,000 or, 180, 190,000 rupees. And from each child, they charge like close to 80 to 90,000 rupees. And then on top of that, if you go through us, you have to pay us a service charge in case if you have a scholarship for more than 50% of the fee value. The amount you pay us is about 400,000, 450,000 from the main applicant and extra 100,000 from the secondary applicant. And in case if you end up receiving a scholarship for an amount below 49%, or in case if you decide to go in as a full fee paying applicant, then these charges will drop to about 350,000 from the main applicant and extra 100,000 from the co-applicant, and we don't charge from children. And then you have to think about air tickets. So there's two air tickets involved, especially if you want to fly to any of these three countries, Sweden, Finland, or Estonia. You have to add the air ticket cost involved for visiting New Delhi, and then you have to add the air ticket involved for the major destinations. So two tickets involved. Usually nowadays, single ticket to New Delhi, return ticket will cost you at least 100,000 rupees. And then single ticket from Colombo, one-way ticket from Colombo to any of these European destinations will cost on a minimum like 250,000 rupees. So I'll put it this way. If you're an individual applicant, to cover the visa fees, our charges, and the air tickets, I think you are looking at a cost of about 1.2 million. That's the average cost you're looking at. In case if you are a family of two and want to pay your visa fees and cover all these air tickets and pay our charges, I think you're looking at 1.8 million. And if you have a child and you want to add your child to the process, I think you have to add at least 350,000 rupees for each additional child or each child you have. So that's the easiest way to wrap it up, Jack. 12 million, sorry, 1.2 million for an individual applicant to cover all these initial expenses, 1.8 million for a family of two to cover all these initial expenses, and at least 2.15 million or 2.2 million for a family of three to cover all these initial expenses. And then you have to also think about other expenses. For example, when you visit New Delhi, there's a courier fee to pay to receive your resident permit cards, usually about 1,000, 1,500 INR, that kind of a range. And then Finnish embassy want you to legalize your marriage certificate and the birth certificates of any child you have, which will also cost about 3,000 to 4,000 INR on average, about 12,000, 10,000 rupees. So these are some of the additional expenses you have to prepare for. But the budget I quoted earlier, about 1.2 for an individual, 1.8 for a family of two, and 2.1 to 2.2 for a family of three will cover most of these minor expenses. So that's about the cost. So let's quickly talk about the pathways of settling down because I understand most, if not all of you, actually want to look into the possibility of settling down in these countries in the long term. There's two major pathways you can use. The most commonly used one is to go for a work permit. As I mentioned before, to apply for a work permit, you have to have a certain salary requirement met. In Sweden, it's about 28,500 Swedish kroners, and in Finland, it's about 14,000 euros annually. If you or your spouse manage to find a job offer, you can apply for a work permit, and about 4 years time on a work permit will qualify you to apply for permanent residency. That's the most commonly used pathway in most of these European countries. And then the most preferred pathway of mine is the second one, which is to go for a PhD. If you want to apply for a master's, and if you have an interest in continuing to a doctoral level program, all these Scandinavian countries, they allow you to, there's no tuition fees to pay, and they will allow you to receive some kind of a reasonable monthly stipend to cover up your living expenses. And the advantage of getting into a PhD is that all PhDs are generally considered as employment. So you naturally fulfill that work permit requirement to qualify for a long stay visa because it takes at least good 4 years to complete these programs. So that's probably one of the safest options I've seen. But having said that, the most commonly used option by most of our clients and pretty much all the recent immigrants from the region are through a work permit. So you have to prepare for one of the two. As I said before, if you are an individual applicant, if you have absolute confidence in your ability to find a job offer in these countries can become, excellent options for you to settle down in the long term because I have not seen a situation where they change their migration laws, overnight. Very rarely happens. But you will have kind of an increased advantage if you are married and if the two of you are going together, because if one of you can find a job offer or if one of you can get into a PhD, you can apply for a work permit so the other person can naturally stay and work in the country. The advantage there is instead of um, you know having required to find a job offer on your own, now you have two individuals who can try to do the same. And that's pretty much it. And I'd like to take in any questions. If you have any, I can see there are some questions in the chat box. I'll quickly try to answer them. You can ask your questions verbally, or you can, send them to the chat box. Just message it, and I can try to clear it up. Thank you. Upeksha has a question. I'm currently a university undergraduate. I'm currently in industrial training. We have graduation in June next year. I studied math stream in A-levels and now my degree is in science and technology. Specialization is material science and technology. Which country can I apply to for masters and which country is good? And what kind of jobs are available in the area I'm studying? Well, Upeksha, if you are a fresh graduate, again, this can be a bit controversial, but my advice is try to gather some working experience before trying for your masters. Again, it depends. If you want to progress academically, like to complete a PhD and then maybe become a lecturer with the intention of becoming some senior academic professional in the long term, all of these countries are actually good for individual applicants. But then again, you do have material science pretty much in all these countries again, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Estonia. So the best option is always the kind of an offer you have with the least amount of tuition fees to be paid. If you have a scholarship, better, you can feel more safer. But the whole idea is once you complete your master's and come out of the university, you have to compete for a very limited number of opportunities available with plenty of immigrants who would probably have higher level of experience compared to you. That's a very common occurrence in most of these Western countries nowadays, and people don't think about it. So if you if I were you, what I'll do is once I complete my bachelor's, I'd probably gain some working experience, at least for 2 3 years, and then I'll consider applying for a master's. But then again, if you have any intention to progress academically, complete your master's and then move to a doctoral level program, you can apply right away. It's just my opinion. If you want to apply, we can apply. There's no issues with that. But that issue is an actual one. I can give you one example. I had this. Anyway, I always tell this in my sessions. I know of this young guy. I met him about a couple of years back now. He has completed his bachelor's degree in the field of computer science or related area at one of these prestigious Australian universities. I think it's Monash or Swinburne. I cannot recall the exact one. But what happened is he has completed his bachelor's and he was given a 2 year time period to find a job offer in a skilled occupation to apply for a skill assessment and try his luck with permanent residency. What happened is he managed to secure an internship, but he was not able to find a job offer because if you know about the Australian immigration process, the general requirement is if you are onshore, you have to work here at least for 1 year for most of the occupations. But he was not able to fulfill that requirement. So when I met him, he was about to go back to Sri Lanka to work there. So after gaining some experience, he can always come back. He receive some additional points for his Australian education. It's a very common occurrence than you think because the idea is the world is getting more competitive. There are plenty of immigrants going from one country to another. So the moment you step out from the university and try to find a job offer, you have to compete with whole lot of other immigrants from around the world for most of the times limited number of offers. That's where experience fit in. So if you want to apply for your master's, you can apply for a scholarship, no problem with it. If you have at least a second law or so, and if you can help us with IS or PTE. But the whole point is once you complete your master's and when you step out to the job market to find a job offer, you have to face competition nowadays. Increased level of competition compared to 20, 30 years back. Uh, well, that's probably the only question I have for today. Any other questions? I think I have more. Uh,
Hello. So
Upeksha,
what about PhDs? Do you process PhD applicants?
uh, so we don't process for doctoral level programs because the process is far more complex. But then again, if you have a bachelor's and master's completed, you can definitely give it a try. I can give you a tip. If you visit the employment sections of these websites, university websites, they usually publish their ongoing research vacancies where you can find out about projects of your interest and then try to apply directly to see what works for you. That's the best thing
Second
you
thing
can do.
is there a age limit, lower or upper age limit for these applications?
No. To give you a simple answer, no. But then again, your ability to successfully receive a visa sometimes depend on some other factors. For an example, if you have pretty much like grown-up children, let's say if you have a 17-year-old child, then countries like Sweden might question about your intentions. It has happened to us in the past. But having said that, legally, there's no age requirement or age limit as such.
And have any of your students got 100% scholarships?
Plenty of them, yeah. Uh, I think, like as I mentioned very early into the conversation, we have over 1 billion rupees worth of scholarships, and that contains plenty of even fully funded scholarships. But nowadays, we are at a declining stage. So compared to 10, 15 years back, now the numbers of those who receive full scholarships are about like 10-15% of all applicants. But then if we add Finland as an option, still the possibility of securing at least a partial scholarship is over 60-65%. So we have to apply and see what works for you again.
Thank you.
No worries.
Right. Hello.
Um,
Hello.
yes.
Yes.
Hi.
Um, if my master's is not related to the bachelor's, is it fine?
It depends
For an
because
instance,
what's your bachelor's is about?
it's in marketing,
Uh-huh. And
and
yeah, if you
yeah,
want to apply,
mhm.
yes, please go ahead. Sorry, I
Yeah.
interrupted.
So that's fine. So what happened was I also am an ACC affiliate, so I have my finance professional qualification. My plan is to pursue finance. So, but my bachelor's is no longer related. It will be fine.
Um, I don't think it'll be fine for these countries, Mr. Salman. The reason is if you apply for Sweden or even Finland, the difference between these countries and most of these major destinations is that all of these countries they have some kind of a limit on the number of students they admit for each programs. So in your case, your competitive space is actually marketing because ACCA is usually considered as a professional qualification and it
Mhm.
will have no relevancy whatsoever in the usual selection process. So if you want to apply for something like finance, I recommend you to try your luck with countries like Finland because what we can do is we can apply for about two different marketing related ones and two different finance related ones. So even if you're not admitted for finance related ones, you'll still have the probability of being able to receive some sort of an admission for marketing related ones. That's the best we can do. But
Thanks a
you
lot.
don't have
Yeah.
this problem in most of these major destinations like English speaking world because
Mhm.
I have seen people who have completed biology bachelors applying for accounting related masters. So it's possible in that part of the world.
Thanks a lot.
Nice. So
Greetings.
yes. All right. So Nadisha has a question. Are there laboratory science and health science masters
Sir.
available and
This is
scholarships
also
for?
regarding the PhD.
Okay. I'll quickly cover this question and come back to you, Hilda. So I was reading the question by Nadisha. Any laboratory science and health science and scholarship for those? Yeah, you do have plenty of options. You do have like molecular biology, biochemistry, and even like biotechnology. It depends on your bachelor's anyway. If you can message what your bachelor's is, I can provide a better answer. And yes, they do have 100% scholarship options. But my advice nowadays is if you want to stick to 100% scholarships, it's better to apply on your own and see if it works for you. If you want to receive an admission and still be considered for scholarships, you can go through us. The real reason is you're paying us a reasonable amount of money and we're not in a position to guarantee you any scholarship whatsoever. So sometimes you can end up feeling disappointed if you stick to 100% scholarships. But if you are open to explore your options of being able to receive some sort of a scholarship, and then consider going as a fee paying applicant. If you do not end up with any scholarship, you can confidently apply through us because most of the times we can get the process completed. And Takshanika has a question. I study masters without special degree because I'm undergraduate and my degree program is BSc in IT and it's general. So if that is the case, Takshanika, you cannot apply for Sweden if it's a Sri Lankan degree. Because as I mentioned before, you do have a requirement of having a 4-year degree if it is from a Sri Lankan university. But if you have a good GPA, let's say second lower or so, you can still apply for Finland and all other countries I mentioned if you're an individual applicant, but you cannot apply for Sweden. That's the only difference. And sorry, I don't have your name. I can only see the letter M. I interrupted you. You had a question.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Just I'm also regarding the PhD degree program. So,
Uh-huh.
do we need to find a supervisor, or are you going to help us from that place? So we have to find a supervisor for that one for the PhD.
I understand. Yeah, but the unfortunate part is we do not facilitate PhD applications at all. We have tried that in the past, honestly, but it's a far more complex process because we have to get hold of a supervisor, as you mentioned, and then get the process completed. So being a third party, there's nothing much we can do when it comes to doctoral level programs. As I mentioned before, uh, it's sometimes very organized. If you visit a site like maybe I can type it down, studyinfo.fi, just limit your search to doctoral level. There's plenty of ongoing research programs that you can apply for. The general process works in a way you have to get hold of a supervisor who has to provide some sort of like a acceptance statement, and with that you can apply. But unfortunately, we cannot play any role there. It's far more complex. We don't even know the subject. I mean, if it is business related, maybe we can give it a try. But most other times, we don't have the knowledge required um, to complete that part of the process. So better to apply on your own if you're applying for a PhD. That's just my thought about it. Thank you. Um, And also, Nimesh has a question. Is it possible to apply for masters with a postgraduate level 7 or THM UK qualification? Unfortunately, we cannot process you, Nimesh. Maybe you can give it a try and apply on your own. But again, one key difference between these countries and the mainstream ones is these countries generally do not accept any kind of professional qualifications, which are generally considered as equivalent to bachelor's in Sri Lankan context to be used as entry qualifications for masters. You have to have a bachelor's from a university that's recognized by the World High Educational Database or that listed there, and that's the general requirement. So I don't think it'll be possible. But you can do one thing. If you complete a degree top-up in Sri Lanka, the final year top-up, at a place where they acknowledge your former education, in this case, your OTHM level 7 qualification and award credits for accredited prior learning, later you can apply for a master's without any issue. And Artana also has a question. I'm an Ayurvedic doctor. Is there any opportunities for me? Unfortunately, there's no much opportunities we can offer. And for some strange reason, if you visit the university admissions website, university admissions in Sweden, they specifically mention there's a couple of degrees, BA, MS, and Unani medicine from Sri Lankan universities are not accepted to apply for masters in Sweden. I cannot speak for Finland because we don't generally apply for Finland alone. And in your case, there's nothing much we can offer you. But I know there are some countries where it's possible, like Canada. I think I have another question. Tushar, bachelor එකක් තියෙනවා first class with bachelor's top මට scholarship එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන් වේද? අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම try කරන්න පුළුවන්. කොහොමත් first class එකක් තියෙනවා නම් හොඳම දේ ඉතින් scholarship එකකට try කරන එක තමයි. නමුත් ඉතින් පුළුවන් නම් කියන්නේ ඔයාලට අර increase probability එකක් හදාගන්න ඕන නම් IELTS score එකක් හෝ PT score එකක් හදාගන්න. IELTS නම් 6.5 is 6 for each component. PT නම් 62 overall with no component less than 59. මොකද IELTS or PT තියෙනවා නම් තමයි ඔයාලට freely ලෝකේ තියෙන ඕනම option එකකට try කරන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් හරිම limited number of options තමයි ඉතුරු වෙන්නේ. එතකොට ඉතින් ස්කෝලර්ෂිප් එකකදී සාර්ථක වෙන්න ඉඩ අඩුයි.
What are the options for learning Swedish or Finnish from Sri Lanka itself?
I've seen some classes being conducted, but then again, I don't know how good they are. My understanding is it's better to learn on learn using online contents. There's plenty of free contents available on YouTube nowadays, I've seen. But then once you move into these countries, they have more structured learning mechanisms available. Like in Sweden, they have Swedish for immigrant centers, pretty much located in every single township, where all the immigrants can register and learn the language free of charge from beginner to advanced level.
Thank you.
Nice. And okay, thank you, Takshanika. Mm, okay, uh, M has a question. Will it be a problem if I ask for another master, double master? Doesn't matter. We can do that. So if you want to apply for another master, perfectly possible, but we have to pick a subject area that's different from your previous masters. For example, if you have a management related bachelor's and if you have completed an MBA, this time we can try an option like entrepreneurship or travel and tourism or something else, which aligns with your first previous qualifications, but then slightly different from your master's. It is perfectly possible, and we have done that in the past as well. Piyumi has a question. Sir, are there any opportunities for statistics? Specialized student with a second upper degree. You do have options, Piyumi. If you have computer science related components, you can even try options like data analytics and all that. Or else you have like general statics related options, statics and mathematical modeling. Heaps of options are there for you. And Sulakna has a question. What are Sweden's advantage for healthcare students compared to Australia? Good question. So I would say you have more disadvantages than advantages. The reason why I'm telling that is if you are into, I'll put it this way. By the way, I got it wrong. If you want to focus on a career related to research and development, maybe Sweden can be a better option because I know for a fact that it's one of the most innovative countries in the world. They spend millions of euros worth of money for R&D. So if you are into pharmaceutical or any kind of R&D related role, then it can be much better than Australia. But if you want to have a career in the health sector, let's say if you are a nurse or some kind of a, let's say MLT or someone who's engaged in a professional occupation in the medical sector, I think Australia is a better option because there's a clear-cut process where you can register and practice. It can be tough, but then again, they have clearly laid out all the requirements. Anyone can find this information online. You want to become a nurse, you have a bachelor's degree in nursing, you complete your NCLEX, you complete your objective, what do you call that, OSCE, objective structured clinical exam, something. You pass both the tests, you have an IELTS score of 7 for each component, and then you can become a registered nurse in Australia. But in Sweden, it's far more complex. For an example, if you are any of these professional in the health sector, you have to learn the Swedish language, and then you have to do all your regulatory exams in the Swedish language, and then start practicing there, which can be very difficult compared to Australia. So it depends on your occupation. If you are into research position or if you're into some kind of R&D position, then Sweden can be a better option. But if you are like a medical professional, then Australia can be the better option. That's just my opinion, anyways. Hettiara, she has a question. I recently graduated with BSc in GIS. I work with software and I prefer to study in a Scandinavian country with a fully funded scholarship. Do I need to work experience before applying for a master's? Well, I think it's always better to have some experience before moving abroad. This doesn't apply to Sweden. That's just my general understanding about how the world works now. There's increased competition. So if you want to find a job offer in the long term, they will not care much about your qualification. Experience becomes the first and foremost requirement. So it's better to have some working experience first. I can give you hundreds of examples. Most of my clients who have like 3, 4, 5 years of experience in the software industry, I've not seen a single applicant who have failed in securing a job offer in these countries. If you have some sort of extensive experience in engineering or software or any of these other occupations, there's a very increased kind of a chance for you to find a job offer. But if you do not have any experience just after the graduation, then it doesn't matter. You can still go there. There's no problem with it. But the moment you come out and try to find a job offer, you will have to compete with a whole lot of other people who have years of experience behind them. So if you ask me the question, is it good to have some working experience before I move into a foreign country? My personal opinion, being an immigrant myself, is it's better if you can have some working experience. Is it a must? No, it's not, because you can, all they look into is your bachelor's qualification and sometimes the English proficiency test score. So yeah, that's all I think I have as questions. By the way, you do have plenty of options related to GIS as well in these countries. That's all I have for today. So maybe I'll wrap up the session. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact us, and I'll quickly. Okay, Tushar also has a question. Bachelor එකක් තියෙනවා first class batch of මට scholarship එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන් ඉද මම හිතන්නේ මම තුෂාර ඔය වගේම ප්‍රශ්නයකට කලින් උත්තර දුන්නා ඒකමද මන් දන්නේ නැහැ. අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම පුළුවන්. නමුත් IELTS score එකක් OPT score එකක් හදාගන්න බලන්න. එතන අපිට freely apply කරන්න පුළුවන්. So that's pretty much it. And if you want to contact us, you can use any of these numbers: 0762803838, 770287872, or you can use the WhatsApp only number 0715607333. What's going to happen now is I will send you an assessment application along with a recording of this session, hopefully within the day tomorrow. So if you are to initiate the process, you can do a bit of a research on your own. And in case if you have done enough research and want to get the process started, the earlier you start, the better for us, because we can stop all recruitment activities and focus on what's submitted on time. And that's all for today. Thank you so much, everyone, and appreciate joining us during your Friday afternoon again. And I'll have all the instructions sent to you within the day tomorrow. Thanks again and have a good night.
Thank you, Jamal.